I think it's really important that we try to speak in a way that people would hear us. It's like how platitudinous.
Wait, you just said that right after you were like being super sexist.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
But I think we should really.
I think women should bake cookies. You know what I'm saying, ladies. But I'm joking, obviously, when I say that. Hopefully, people understand it's a joke. But yeah, no, like we should speak in a way like if you're a woman and you want to tell men like, hey, could you do a better job at like stepping up and loving the family? Like you want to kind of appeal to them in a way that they can hear it. So my question for you is, what would Abigail Favale today say to Abigail Favale back in her feminist days if you could sit across from her having a cup of coffee and you had some time? Like, what would you say that she would actually hear it?
Maybe that's a good question because I'm not totally sure what I would have been able to hear. I think once you become an ideologue, it becomes very hard. Even like the best possible argument can sometimes just be hard to hear.
Yeah.
So for example, one of my former students, his name's Stephen Kenyon. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Father Stephen. He's now a priest. And I remember like before I was even on the road to Catholicism, but he had already converted. I remember having debates with him about, especially the priesthood, like why can't women be ordained, and Stephen's super smart. He's also super compassionate and very, very articulate and could give the best possible arguments pretty much for anything. So he was giving me like the best possible arguments. But I had such an emotional resistance to hearing them that it wasn't like I wasn't able to actually hear them because I was unwilling to question my position. So that's kind of a caveat I would give, that I'm not sure that I would be able to hear the kinds of things I'm saying now, because now I make similar arguments that Stephen was making then, right? I don't know. So I'm not quite sure what I would say. But I guess one thing that I would want to talk to her about some of the ironies within feminism, because I think even when I was a feminist, I still, like, I remember actually even saying this sometimes in graduate school, like, I'm a closet essentialist, because I have always been very comfortable with and have liked the idea that men and women are different. And I don't, that's actually why I was interested in feminism in the first place, because I was like, there's something different about being a woman, and I want to know what's good about that. And I want to discover the deeper meaning to that. And so I remember when I was in graduate school doing a master's in gender theory. This would have been in like 2007, 8, something like that. So this was way before like the trans phenomenon really swept through. But I remember I lived in the UK at the time. I was in grad school in Scotland and watching some kind of BBC special on kids who had transitioned. And I remember watching this special. It was about a little boy whose parents had now agreed to raise him as a girl. And what struck me then was like how, his room, it looked like a Pepto-Bismol bottle had exploded. It was just, everything was so hyper feminine. And it seemed to be all about the kind of, there was something very consumerist about it. Like the toys he liked, the clothes he liked, everything was about kind of these very stereotypical kind of objects, and like that's what made him a girl. And I remember, so even then when I was in my kind of like postmodern and very secular place, I was like, that doesn't make you a girl. Like liking pink doesn't make you a girl, and kind of having this suspicion and skepticism about that. So I think I would want to reach those common values about like being a woman is a good thing. So isn't it kind of ironic that women are told that they have to disrupt their healthy physiology with artificial chemicals to function in society? Like, doesn't that kind of suck for women? I think I would, use, or is abortion really that good for women? I think my younger self, I think I would have wanted to give her more permission. Like, it's okay to be against abortion as a feminist, because, I just kind of. Yeah.
I wonder if questions like, what do you think of feminists who just happen to be against abortion?
Right.
Like questions like that are really helpful.
Yeah.
One question I've always heard Trent ask when he's dialoguing with atheists, especially those who aren't really listening, they do seem in the hooks of an ideology, is you'll say, what's the best argument for theism out of all the bad ones?
Yeah.
And why does it fail?
Yeah.
Because that question quickly exposes whether or not you've even bothered to do your homework.
Right.
Very often the atheist, not always, there are very smart, very thoughtful atheists, but very often the atheist will say, well, they're just all bad. I mean, you're basically asking for an argument for Santa Claus. They're all stupid. It's like, well, okay. Like, people have been thinking about these questions for thousands of years. They're very sophisticated philosophers out there so they're not all equally bad, you know. You just haven't done your homework. And I wonder if a question similar to that, to someone who would claim to be a feminist, like maybe something like, what is the least offensive view you think a feminist can hold? Like, to you're a feminist, someone else is a feminist. What can they affirm that you deny, or deny that you affirm, and you still be on the same team? Like, what are the topics we feminists can disagree on? And okay, so why is it okay that she disagree with that? That sort of thing, I wonder.
Yeah. Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I'm trying to think what else I would. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of, I'm cutting you off, sorry.
I didn't have anything.
Okay.
You bailed me out.
Yeah, no, because I'm thinking of myself, you know, like little agnostic / atheist 16-year-old. Like, I think a question like that is, why are you so confident that God doesn't exist? Maybe you're right, but why? Why think that? And I think I would have said something about science without knowing what I meant and hoping you wouldn't ask me to define the term. But it would have rattled me a little bit, even though I would have walked out perhaps seeming unscathed. Not that we're trying to scathe people, but we're trying to arrive at truth.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, that's why I maybe have a little bit of skepticism about apologetics per se, at least kind of the form it tends to take, because, and this is kind of a critique that Charles Taylor, who wrote A Secular Age, that he makes about.
Fantastic. Love that guy.
Yeah. So he talks about how modern apologetics is very deeply modern in the sense that it's basically trying to kind of argue for a position from outside. Like let's say this represents like a Christian understanding of reality, and you're like trying to stand outside of it to make these arguments for it. Whereas I think, at least the way I like to approach it, is to instead to just articulate what it looks like actually inside, to basically say, this is what reality looks like from a Catholic understanding, and you kind of have to enter into it to see it. And then that's, I'm not going to try to convince you to enter into it, but like, I'm going to describe the beauty and the truth that's found within it as much as I can.
Are you familiar with Jonathan Pageau?
Oh yeah, a little bit.
I think that's kind of what he does really well. Yeah, that reminds me of a Chesterton quote. It's the idea of the church is like a cathedral.
Exactly.
You look from without and the stained glass windows aren't illuminated. They just kind of look weird. It's this big stone building, and then you go inside and you can understand it.
I mean, I do think there are people for whom the apologetics approach is really helpful, but I think I've also heard this idea, which I think there's something to it, that oftentimes when people change their beliefs, it's not primarily about, like, they later might give reasons for changing their beliefs. Like, they might later say, well, here's why I'm an atheist. Here are my reasons. But those reasons are almost always kind of found after the fact, that there's something more, I guess, like personal that probably happened in the heart, and then later we kind of find reasons to justify our decision.
Absolutely my experience.
Yeah, I think that's been my experience too.
I was chatting with Alex Plato, Dr. Alex Plato. He was on the show recently. His mother-in-law is a philosopher, and she gave this great analogy about how did she say that like truth is ultimately incommunicable, or not that we can't know what's true or that objective truth doesn't exist, but that Christianity is sort of like when you teach a kid to ride a bike. There's no specific sentence or series of sentences that you can give to a child that he then understands, that he then gets on the bike and rides it perfectly. He has to give himself over to the experience of riding the bike. Right. Christianity is kind of like that. It's like you have to actually give yourself over to it, and it's not something that can kind of be communicated to you prior to that point, I don't think. At least the experience of it.
This circles back to the idea of receptivity, right? Because I think in order for an argument to be persuasive, the person hearing it has to be in a position of receptivity, prior to hearing the argument. I don't think an argument can make you receptive. I think, it's God's grace really that can make us receptive, or an encounter, like having a profound encounter with a person or with Christ or with something unnameable. I think in my own life, I was made receptive by having some of my ideological beliefs shaken up a bit, and that was primarily because I'd become a mother. I'd had this really intense experience, this really intense encounter with, this life I had, this unborn child, and then just the intense process of pregnancy and childbirth and how much that changed me. And it's that what made me receptive to, later after I become Catholic, and I was like, okay, I do want to understand what the church teaches about sexuality. I was reading, like I said before, but I was also praying to be receptive. I was in this receptive posture, right? So, and this kind of, in a way, loops back to the conversation we were having earlier, which is about headship. And I think one little postscript I want to add to that conversation is that we also have to remember that in relation to God, even male human beings are feminine. They should be in that receptive position, right? So even as a man, has to understand his kind of masculine headship.
He's not the initiator in regards to God.
Yeah, he's both in a marriage, he's the bridegroom and an image of Christ in that marriage. But then when it comes to the relationship between Christ and the church, he is bride, right? So there's a way, and I think that relates to how I said, well, what about, so then what about when a man feels, broken or traumatized and wants to be kind of enveloped by his wife? Like, that's okay too, because he is, in a sense, there's a brideliness to his, and experiencing that love through his wife from God is also still something beautiful. So I guess I would want to add that as an addendum to the conversation about headship, that men, remember, like, you are the head. Yes, you have spiritual headship, but you are also the bride, right? So you also have a head. I guess that's it.
Yeah.
You are a head, but you also have a head. And so
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is why our Blessed Mother reveals to us how to be human, most especially, hey?
Yes.
Yeah, man, she's so beautiful. I love her so much.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought about the video.